Late one storm-night in Maple Creek, the kind where thunder rolled low and heavy across the Midwest sky, and rain came down in blinding sheets. Henry Lawson was driving home from his mechanic garage when fate forced him off the quiet road he thought he knew so well. Henry was 36, tall and broad-shouldered, his tan skin weathered by Afghan dust storms and Midwestern winters alike. His calm blue eyes had seen battlefield triage under mortar fire. His hands, steady and sure, could suture a torn artery or rebuild a transmission without hesitation. Once he had been a decorated Army medic with the 101st Airborne, the kind of soldier who ran toward gunfire when others dove for cover. Now he ran a modest garage on the edge of town and raised his 8-year-old daughter, Gwen. 5 years earlier, his wife Audrey had died in what the police called a hit-and-run accident. The case went cold almost instantly. No driver found. No suspects. Just condolences and paperwork. Captain Vernon Drake himself had stood on Henry's porch that night, hand heavy on his shoulder, promising justice. Justice never came. Now Henry lived for Gwen. She had Audrey's smile and Henry's curious mind. She sketched engines in her notebook and declared she'd fix cars like her dad one day. She knew her mother only through stories that always ended the same way. Your mom loved you more than anything in this world. That stormy night, as Henry drove past the wooded stretch near Highway 17, his headlights caught something wrong in the trees below the embankment. Red and blue lights flickered weakly through rain and darkness. A police cruiser lay twisted on its side in a ditch. Smoke rose from the crushed hood. Henry didn't hesitate. He grabbed a flashlight from his glove compartment and plunged into the rain. Mud sucked at his boots as he slid down the slope. The cruiser had rolled and slammed against a tree. Through the shattered window, he saw a figure slumped in the driver's seat, trapped by a jammed belt. Female, early 30s, uniform soaked in blood. His medic instincts snapped into place. He wedged a flashlight into branches, smashed away the remaining glass with a wrench from his tool belt, and sawed through the lock seat belt with his pocket knife. She collapsed into his arms, heavier than she looked, dead weight made worse by rain and shock. He carried her up the embankment toward his truck. Behind him, something sparked under the hood. Flames licked upward. As he laid her across the back seat, her eyes fluttered open. "Don't trust the cops," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rain. "They're watching." Her hand clenched his jacket with surprising strength. In her palm was a blood-stained USB drive. Then she went limp. Sirens wailed in the distance. Not ambulances. Police SUVs. Multiple. Henry glanced back at the burning cruiser. Straight stretch of road. Good visibility. No skid marks. This wasn't weather. This was pursuit. He looked down at her badge, Pierce. Then he made the decision that would change everything. He shut the truck door, turned off his headlights, and drove away down a service road that curved away from Highway 17. 20 minutes later, Henry carried the unconscious officer into his modest ranch house. Gwen slept down the hall. The living room couch, the one where they watched Friday movies, became an emergency bed. Henry retrieved his old medic kit, olive drab canvas worn smooth at the corners. He cut away the officer's uniform shirt and examined the wound. It wasn't crash trauma. It was a bullet graze. Someone had shot at her. He cleaned and stitched the ragged tear with precise efficiency. 14 neat sutures. Bandaged. Monitored breathing. "Daddy." Gwen's sleepy voice floated from the hallway. Henry turned. "Who's that lady?" He knelt. "Someone who needs our help. She's hurt, but she's going to be okay." Gwen nodded solemnly. She trusted him completely. He tucked her back into bed. When he returned, the woman was awake, reaching instinctively for a holster that wasn't there. "Easy," Henry said. "Henry Lawson. I pulled you from your cruiser on Highway 17. You told me not to trust the cops." She studied him carefully. "You were Army," she said. "Combat medic. Afghanistan." She gave a faint nod. "Detective Sergeant Rosalind Pierce. Maple Creek, PD." Her hazel eyes were sharp despite the pain. "My fellow officers did this," she said. Henry felt a coldness settle into his bones. Rosalind explained quickly. She had been investigating corruption inside the department. Evidence tampering, falsified accident reports, missing persons cases quietly buried. Her mentor, Detective Elias Hart, had vanished 2 weeks earlier. Officially, he retired to Florida. She didn't believe it. She had uncovered something called Operation Halo. And tonight, she said quietly, holding up the USB drive, they tried to stop me. In Henry's spare bedroom, the old desktop computer hummed to life. The USB drive clicked into place. Folders filled the screen, videos, spreadsheets, medical files. The first video showed uniformed officers inside an evidence locker swapping narcotics bags and laughing about overtime. The next revealed body cam footage, edited. 2 critical minutes missing. Then a folder labeled Operation Halo. Inside were spreadsheets listing names, dates, dollar amounts, medical notes, status updates. Rosalind scrolled, her face draining of color. Her fingers stopped. This can't be right. Henry leaned closer. There, halfway down the list. Audrey Lawson, age 29. Date, 5 years ago. Notation, dashcam confiscated. Status, eliminated. The room tilted. That's my wife, Henry whispered. They said hit and run. Rosalind's voice was steady, but filled with grief. Your wife saw something she wasn't supposed to. Henry's grief hardened into something colder. What did she see? If her dash cam was confiscated, someone high up ordered it. Silence filled the room, broken only by rain against the windows. Rosalind clicked another file. At the top of an organizational chart, Captain Vernon Drake, the same man who delivered condolences to Henry's door, the same man who promised justice. Headlights swept across the bedroom wall. Henry lifted a blind slat. A dark sedan idled across the street. 2 silhouettes inside, badges glinting. They found us, Rosalind said. Henry thought of Gwen asleep down the hall. Pack what you can carry, he said. We're leaving. Rosalind copied the files to Henry's hard drive and crushed the original USB beneath her boot. Henry grabbed his medic kit, emergency cash, and clothes. He woke Gwen gently. Adventure time, he whispered. She nodded bravely, clutching her teddy bear. The sedan still idled as Henry warmed his truck inside the garage. He killed the lights, raised the door, and floored the accelerator. The truck roared into the rain. The sedan's doors flew open. Men shouted. Henry took a corner at 50 miles per hour. The police scanner crackled. Henry Lawson, wanted for questioning, approached with caution. Bullets shattered the rear window. Gwen screamed. Rosalind turned pale, but focused. Service Road 2 miles ahead. Take it. Henry drove like he once ran under fire, decisive, fearless. They burst through brush concealing an old logging road and finally reached an abandoned ranger cabin deep in the woods. Inside, Henry held Gwen as she cried. At dawn, gray and cold, Henry made a decision. They couldn't hide. They had to expose Operation Halo. And that meant retrieving Audrey's confiscated dash cam from the police impound lot. It's suicide, Rosalind said. I've done worse, Henry replied. He kissed Gwen's forehead. Be brave. Then he headed toward the impound lot alone. The chain-link fence loomed high, topped with razor wire. Henry found a rusted section near the back and pried it loose, slicing his hands in process. Rows of impounded vehicles stretched endlessly. Finally, in the far corner beneath a tarp, he found it, a blue Honda sedan with a crushed front end. Audrey's car. He climbed inside, forcing himself not to brake. After frantic searching, he found the dash cam hidden in the glove compartment. Headlights flooded the lot. A patrol car entered. Henry dug beneath a truck. Boots approached. Radio crackled. Then, a gunshot from outside the fence. The officer ran toward the sound. Henry scrambled free and sprinted toward the gap. Rosalind stood by the fence, borrowed pistol smoking. You weren't supposed to come, Henry said as they ran. And let you get caught, she replied. They drove away as sirens converged behind them. Back at the cabin, Henry plugged in the dash cam. The footage began to play. Audrey driving home, humming softly. Then her headlights illuminated 2 police cruisers behind the old county hospital. Officers loading something body-shaped into a white van. One officer looked up, spoke into his radio, wrote down her plate number. 3 hours later, her car was struck from behind at 60 miles per hour. The camera captured the vehicle for a split second before impact. A dark blue police interceptor. "That's Drake's car," Rosalind whispered. Henry watched the clip 3 times. The man who consoled him had murdered his wife. Premeditated. Calculated. Cold. Rosalind's voice steadied. "We send this everywhere." Henry nodded slowly. No more burying the truth. They began uploading everything. The federal servers, investigative journalists, state prosecutors, the FBI, and then they waited. The response came faster than either of them expected. Within 24 hours, unmarked federal SUVs rolled into Maple Creek. Agents from the FBI's Internal Affairs Division secured warrants and descended on the Maple Creek Police Department. News vans followed close behind, satellite dishes rising like steel mushrooms outside the station. Captain Vernon Drake realized the walls were closing in, and desperate men make desperate choices. When Henry returned to the Ranger cabin after checking a nearby gas station for updates, the door hung splintered from its hinges. The room was empty. Gwen was gone. A knife pinned a note to the wooden table. "Old station warehouse. Come alone or she dies." Henry's vision tunneled. Rosalind grabbed his arm before he could bolt. "It's a trap." "I know," he said, voice shaking with restrained fury. "But she's my daughter. Then we do this smart." The old station warehouse stood at the edge of town, a crumbling brick relic slated for demolition. Windows were boarded. Rust crawled up its metal doors. They approached separately. Rosalind, despite her injured shoulder, circled to the rear with a recovered service pistol. Henry entered through a warped side door. The interior smelled of mildew and dust. Broken equipment cast long shadows under dim hanging bulbs. "Henry Lawson," Drake's voice echoed. Henry stepped into the open center of the warehouse. Captain Vernon Drake stood in full uniform, metals polished, expression calm. Beside him, Gwen, bound to a chair. Tears streaked her small face. Henry's heart shattered. "Let her go," he said. Drake smiled faintly. "You always were predictable. Medics, heroes, can't resist saving someone. You murdered my wife." "She was a witness," Drake replied flatly. "Witnesses are liabilities. You call that policing?" "I call it profitable policing. Operation Halo wasn't just organs. It was leverage, power, influence. You have no idea how many doors we opened." Henry stepped forward. "You hit her car." Drake shrugged. "Accidents happen." He drew his weapon. The first shot cracked through the warehouse. Henry dove behind a concrete pillar. Gwen screamed. Then another gunshot rang out, but not Drake's. Rosalind's bullet tore through Drake's shoulder from above. She had climbed into the rafters for elevation. Drake's gun clattered to the floor. Henry rushed him. They collided hard, crashing into rusted machinery. Drake was trained, strong, but Henry carried 5 years of buried grief and battlefield reflexes. Drake swung. Henry absorbed it and drove a fist into his ribs. They grappled, slamming into a steel cart. "You should have stayed quiet," Drake spat. "You should have stayed human," Henry growled. Drake lunged for his fallen gun. Henry tackled him, slamming him to the concrete. Before either could regain control, warehouse doors exploded inward. "FBI, drop your weapons." Agents flooded in, rifles raised. Rosalind descended from the rafters. Hands up, Henry released Drake and stepped back. Drake stared in disbelief. What he hadn't known was that Rosalind had activated a live stream before entering. Everything, every confession, had been broadcast and recorded to federal servers and multiple news outlets simultaneously. There was no burying this, no erasing it. Drake was cuffed on the spot. So were 12 other officers by nightfall. The fallout shook Maple Creek to its foundation. Operation Halo was exposed as a decade-long organ trafficking ring protected by falsified reports and corrupted oversight. More than 40 victims were identified. Families who had been told their loved ones died in accidents or disappeared finally learned the truth. Federal indictments stacked high. Drake faced life imprisonment. The Maple Creek Police Department was dismantled and rebuilt from the ground up. Transparency became law. Oversight was no longer optional. Rosalind Pierce received the Medal of Valor for risking her life to expose corruption from within. During the ceremony, she stood straight despite her healing shoulder. Afterward, away from cameras, she told Henry quietly, "You reminded me what the badge is supposed to mean." Henry didn't reply. He simply nodded. A week later, Henry took Gwen to Audrey's grave. The headstone was simple white marble beneath a broad oak tree. For the first time, he knew the truth of what happened that night 5 years ago. Gwen placed wildflowers at the base. "Mom," she whispered, "Daddy saved another mom, like you would have wanted." Henry's throat tightened. He let the tears fall freely. Audrey hadn't died in randomness. She had died because she saw evil and didn't look away. Now she had justice. Rosalind was promoted to lead the newly formed Internal Affairs Division. She worked relentless hours rebuilding trust, ensuring oversight mechanisms were airtight. Officers who ignored corruption were held accountable. Maple Creek slowly began to heal. Henry reopened his garage. Ironically, he now serviced cruisers for the Reform Department. It felt like restoring something broken. One Saturday afternoon, Gwen presented Rosalind with a handmade bracelet woven from thin wire scraps. "Family doesn't always wear badges," Gwen said seriously. Rosalind knelt, eyes shining. "No, sweetheart. Sometimes family wears grease-stained coveralls." They weren't bound by romance. They were bound by survival, by truth, by shared loss and shared courage. On a warm Sunday evening months later, Henry's old truck rolled down a country road toward the Maple Creek County Fair. The sky burned orange and gold. Gwen chattered excitedly about rides and cotton candy. Henry glanced at Rosalind in the passenger seat. She smiled back. They had faced a system rotten at its core. They had stood against it, and they had won. The storm that began with a crashed cruiser in a ditch had ended with a town reclaiming its trust. As the truck's taillights faded into the glow of the fairgrounds, laughter and music drifting on the wind, Henry thought about Audrey, about courage, about how ordinary people, mechanics, detectives, children with teddy bears, could confront extraordinary evil. The system hadn't saved itself. People did. And in Maple Creek, for the first time in years, the badge meant something again.